how can we use NIL not only to make you some money, some spending money, or for some athletes is even more than spending money, but how can we also put you in a position to network and meet with people who might provide you jobs after graduation, and then to gain those additional skills that are going to look great on your resume when you're done with college.
Welcome to Sports Mom Rapport, where we support and connect with moms of athletes while sharing helpful advice from each other and some guest experts along the way. This is Tara.
And I'm Destiny. Thank you for joining us as we highlight you incredible moms.
Welcome to Sports Mom Rapport. I'm Tara, and I'm here with my co-host, Destiny. Today's episode is packed with some really exciting and important insights around college athletics and name, image, and likeness, or NIL, with our guest, Kristi Dosh.
Kristi is a former attorney, and she worked as a sports business reporter for ESPN. Now she spends her time writing, teaching, speaking, and consulting around college athletics and NIL.
We'll be talking with Kristi about how athletes can use NIL to build their resume, promote products and services, and the steps they need to take to get started. She'll discuss how to know when it's time to hire an agent, and more importantly, how to find one you can trust.
We'll dive deep into the House settlement and what it means for the future of college athletics. This episode is packed with valuable advice for parents, coaches, and athletes. Let's get started. Welcome, Kristi, to Sports Mom Rapport. Could you please introduce yourself and share a bit about your background and your experience?
Absolutely. My name's Kristi Dosh, and I am a former practicing attorney. I did something completely unrelated to sports, but I blogged on the side about legal issues in sports and in particular in college athletics. And so one of the early things I wrote about, I remember, was the Ed O'Bannon trial, which in my opinion was sort of the first domino that fell that got us to where we are now with NIL and revenue sharing and some of the things I'm sure we're going to talk about today. But I was doing that as a hobby on the side. I've always loved to write, and it was a creative outlet for me. And over the course of several years, it led me to really great opportunities to write for outlets like Forbes and to do some television and radio appearances. And no one was more surprised than I was when I got a call that ESPN wanted to talk to me about coming to be their sports business reporter. And so in 2011, I left practicing law and I went to ESPN to be their sports business reporter. And I have never gone back to practicing in a firm, although I feel like I use my legal degree, especially lately, all the time in my reporting. And then also I teach classes on NIL and also on sports media law at the University of Florida in the journalism department and the sports management department, where I had the pleasure of having Tara's daughter, Leah, as my TA in 2 different classes that I taught. So that's kind of been a new thing for me the last few years, but I'm really enjoying it. So I kind of split my time between writing, teaching, speaking, and consulting, but it's all revolves around college athletics and in particular NIL.
That's just amazing. It's so exciting to hear all that you're able to do. And I don't know how you fit that into a 24-hour day, but I'm excited to hear a little bit more. Thank you.
I always tell people it's because I don't have kids. So that's why I have time to do all these things.
Well, we appreciate all that you do, and your resume is super impressive. So thankful that Leah got to TA for you and be in your presence, absorb all the information that you had to share and all. It's interesting how your jobs evolved and how you put all that hard work out there and ESPN reaching out. Will you share with us what name, image, and likeness, or NIL, is, what it means for student athletes, and historically, what did NIL look like?
So name, image, and likeness really came about from this movement to allow student athletes to profit off of their own name, image, and likeness. And that has taken a lot of different shapes. The one we probably hear about most is social media marketing. So athletes getting paid to put up a post on Instagram or TikTok or what have you. But we've also seen student athletes make money on their music. We've seen student athletes writing books. Tara, your daughter Leah created the first ever gymnastics board game, and that's always one of the creative uses that I bring up when I'm giving examples to student athletes. It's really anything they do where they're going to use their own name or image to promote either their own products and merchandise or someone else's. And it can take so many different creative ways to do it, but also things that I think your everyday fan is surprised they weren't allowed to do before, like get paid to teach a lesson to a youth athlete. I did not play college athletics. I played my whole life up until college, but when I was in college, I had grown up mostly playing softball, and I did pitching lessons when I was in college for younger athletes. And I made really good money back in like the early aughts when I was in college teaching pitching lessons. But a college pitcher couldn't have done that. They can now, thanks to this change in NIL rules.
Thank you for explaining that. I know NIL is in the media. People don't necessarily know what exactly it means. So thank you for clarifying that for us.
Of course.
Yeah, I appreciate that explanation because I think a lot of people for a long time thought that it just meant if their merchandise was sold in the bookstore at the school, that they would get, $1 for every jersey that was sold. And that is part of it, but it's so much bigger than that. And so I appreciate you giving some examples of what it can look like for the athlete.
Athletes, some of them are being really smart about putting together opportunities that they can take with them beyond graduation that aren't tied just to their sport and to them being a college athlete. And I know I'm going to brag on Leah so much in this podcast, but it's because I know so much about what she did with her NIL. And she became an incredible video creator and editor. And she was doing, and I think still is doing, UGC campaigns where she's shooting video. And it's not even about her name, image, and likeness. Her face is not even in the videos, but she's creating videos showcasing, products or services for other people and getting paid to do that. That's something that people can go make a career on. And I know the job she ultimately ended up with, they were impressed, I'm sure, by some of the skills she gained during NIL. And that's what I love most about NIL is the athletes who are being smart about it. And they're not just doing things because they are good on the field or they're good on the court. They're finding ways to monetize that they can keep doing for years after graduation.
So essentially, it's allowing college athletes to now do what wasn't allowed until maybe the professional level.
Right. I've gone on campus and talked to athletes since 2010, I think. And I used to go talk to them about how to get ready to go out in the real world. And we would talk about resumes and cover letters, and we would do these mock interviews. Student athletes, they had such confidence issues around going out into the real world and looking for a job because most of them had no opportunity to do an internship during college because internships didn't fit their schedule as an athlete. So they looked around and they saw their classmates who'd had all these internship opportunities and had built these resumes. And they would sit down with me for their resume and cover letter review. And they would say, I don't know what to put on my resume. I've never had a job. And it's like, okay, but you've been a college athlete, and then we would talk about all of the, especially soft skills, they gained as a college athlete and how we could reflect their time as a college athlete on their resume. But they were right. For some of them, that's all they had was their athletic experience to put on there. And now I've seen some athletes putting together some really cool resumes where maybe they still haven't had like a traditional job to put on their resume, but they're able to put brand campaigns that they've done and speaking engagements and different types of things that they've done with their NIL, where not only did they hopefully have the chance to make money, which they couldn't do before, but now they're adding to their resume too. And for me, like that's been such a big emphasis when I talk to athletes and when I get brought into athletic departments is how can we use NIL not only to make you some money, some spending money, or for some athletes, it's even more than spending money, but how can we also put you in a position to network and meet with people who might provide you jobs after graduation and then to gain those additional skills that are going to look great on your resume when you're done with college. And it just wasn't something the athletes really had the opportunity or the sort of motivation to do prior to NIL.
It's incredible. I love to hear all of those opportunities, especially since I have a college athlete and you too, Tara. Obviously, Leah's done amazing things and Lily as well. So it's just exciting to hear all the opportunities that college athletes are being given through NIL. How would you say that you came to truly be the expert that you are in the NIL space?
It was intentional. I appreciate being called an expert. And a lot of people argued like there are no NIL experts right now, but I tried to put myself into a position where I knew as much as I could know about NIL. I knew that it was going to change college athletics, that especially it was going to change the college athlete experience. And I wanted to be part of that. So I actually, in 2020, during the pandemic, when we all had a little extra time on our hands because we were stuck at home, I knew it was coming because California had passed their state law about NIL and other states were starting to pass laws. And I sort of just accepted that it was probably going to happen. The NCAA wasn't going to be able to stop it. I went to an SEO coach. I've had a website called Business of College Sports since 2010. I think I started it sitting at my law office desk and I never really made money on that site. It was just a place where I could write and where I could gather data. And I've always just been super interested in the business side of college sports, but it was always just sort of a hobby. And I went to this SEO coach in 2020 and I said, look, NIL is coming. And she wasn't even a college sports fan. She had no idea what I was talking about, but I tried to explain to her best I could, this is what's coming. And I said, I want my website to be the destination for this. I want to have the breaking news, but I also want to have the resources that athletes and that administrators on campuses need to allow athletes to maximize these opportunities. And she really helped me from an SEO and like a website perspective with, okay, here's how we set up your website. She taught me a lot about keyword research, and here's how we figure out the types of things you want to cover on the site. What she gave me paired with the social media following and the newsletter that I already had from years of having blogged on this site, I think she put me in a great position for that. And I do rank at the top of Google search results for all kinds of stuff around NIL. And I was able to actually make it my full-time job. That blog had been a hobby for a decade. It brought me things like speaking engagements and stuff like that. Like it always served a purpose, but I was able to make it my full-time job. And so I tell people all the time, I can't be unbiased about NIL because it changed my life too. And it's just been such a rewarding experience because previously I didn't really talk to athletes. I only talked to administrators. And now I talk to athletes probably 3 times as much as I talk to administrators, and getting to see how people get creative and gain these skills and have changed their trajectories after college has been so rewarding. So I'm incredibly grateful that my planning, it worked out even better than I ever thought it would. Like I had a plan going in, but it has been far better than I even planned for.
It's so beautiful when it excels your plan. And I love how you were just blogging on the side and that was what you enjoyed. And now it has turned into full time and you're just helping so many people. That's a beautiful thing when you love what you do.
It's very nice. I used to be a corporate attorney chained to my desk all day. And now
Aw.
I get to travel all over the country and be in all these different college campuses. And I just love it. College athletes are the best. I have so much fun when I get to go be on campus or be at an event and interact directly with these college athletes. They're all so incredible.
That's awesome. Good energy to be around. I love it. Can you let us know what you believe are the first steps that a student athlete should take to start leveraging their name, image, and likeness?
If I sit down with an athlete and they're like, I have no idea where to get started, I ask them 3 things. I say, what are you already doing that you really enjoy? And I get stories about they love fashion, they paint on the side, they are a musician, they have these outside hobbies and interests outside of their sport. And that's good to hear about. The very first athlete I remember talking to about NIL is a softball player named Sid McKinney. She plays pro now, but she was at Wichita State. And I think day 1 of NIL, she DM'd me on Twitter and said, I want to do NIL. How do I get started? And that's what I asked her. I said, what do you enjoy doing outside of your sport? Because I think that athletes who focus their content and their NIL efforts solely around their sport, it will die when you are no longer in that sport. And whether that's immediately after you graduate college, or if you're able to go pro in whatever your sport is for a few years, at some point, you are no longer going to be an athlete. And if you've built all your opportunities around that, they likely will go away. And so I like to know about their other hobbies. And we've also seen how that has garnered bigger and better deals. Like I've seen athletes who are really into hunting or fishing, and they have all this content on their social media about that. Well, they're super valuable to the brands in that space because they have a niche targeted audience. And we've seen those athletes, even if they're not big name athletes and they're not at big name schools, and they're people who, if I said their name, you would have never heard of them before. They're making crazy money on NIL because they had this niche where they were already posting content. So I always ask them, like, what are you already into? What are you interested in? And then we also talk about what are your favorite brands? And I usually make them write out a list. What are the brands you already love? Whether that's restaurants you eat at, it's gear you use for your sport, or maybe it's, a fashion brand you love or a shoe brand you love, whatever it is, who are the brands you're loyal to and that you love? Because if you're going to be doing this on your own and you're not going to have an agent and you're going to do proactive outreach, that's where we're going to start. We're going to start with the brands you already love. And even better if those brands are already in your social content, because now we can go to them and say, look, I was talking about you even before I came to ask to work with you. So I get them to make that list. But then I also want to start talking to them about, my second question to them is, what do you want to do after graduation? Because if we can tailor your NIL activities for what you want to do after graduation, like for example, quite a few athletes have come to me and they want to do something in the media after graduation, especially sports media. Like they want to stay around sports, but they know they're not going to go pro. And so sports media is a good avenue. Well, a great thing they can do is start a podcast or even just do little shorts on TikTok or on Instagram, short video content talking about your sport or talking about another sport. There have been some athletes who've done that really successfully. In fact, Anna Camden, who was at Penn State and now she has transferred and I think she's at Richmond now. She started doing these little clips about her sport. She's a women's basketball player, and I think she did some men's basketball stuff too at Penn State. And she attracted the attention of ESPN, and they used her in some segments on SportsCenter to have a college athlete perspective on her sport. And so there's some really cool things that you can do to put yourself in a position to get experience that will help you get a job after graduation so that you're building a portfolio of sorts. So it looks different. Everybody comes to me and they're like, how do I get started with NIL? Well, there's not a one size fits all. I can tell you the questions to ask yourself and then how to pursue and reach out to brands or pursue those kind of opportunities. Your plan isn't going to look anything like maybe your teammate's plan who has totally different goals or totally different interests. So I think it's better to figure out what they already enjoy doing and what they're already active with. When athletes come to me and they see that everybody's making money on social media, they have 100 followers and they actually don't even like being on social media, that's fine. So we're not going to try to do social media marketing because we would have to talk about how to start building your following so that you can start getting the deals. But now you've told me you don't even enjoy it. You just want to do it because you think that's the only way to monetize your NIL. And it's not. I know athletes making incredible money with their music, with writing books, with teaching lessons. There's all these other ways that they can make money. I think the plan looks different according to who the athlete is we're talking to. That's kind of my initial meeting. If I'm sitting down with an athlete, that's sort of what it looks like.
It's absolutely beautiful that you are focusing on their interests and setting them up for success in the future because, the sport is probably going to end. And what is it that you are interested in? Where can you make your mark that it's not necessarily on social media, but what is it that you like to do? And I like that writing down the brands that you are loyal to. It's really helping them think outside of the box and what they want to do with their future.
Yeah. Sometimes these deals aren't cash. Sometimes it's helping you get down your expenses. Like I know Leah did something for my class that she TAs in before she graduated and left UF, and she allows me to still use the video. And it has her pitch that she sent to Just Salads in Gainesville. And she tells the class, I was eating at Just Salads every single day. And then when NIL came about, I reached out to them and told them, I'm a big fan. I eat there every single day. Here's the type of content I could create for you that I think my audience would be super excited about. And they did a deal with her. And so, I think she was getting free food there. Like these deals aren't always cash. And sometimes they're a mix of cash and a product or a service. But if you just look at what you're already doing on a daily basis, there's a lot you can tap into there.
That makes complete sense. I would go for some nice salads from Just Salads if I could go in and get a discount.
Yeah, the pizza and smoothie places in a lot of these college towns have done enormous numbers of NIL deals because it's easy for them to give away free food. That is not a big expense for a restaurant owner, especially in exchange for promotion from a student athlete who is known in that community, or even just that community likes to support that school. If you've already got an athlete who's eating there every day and is excited about your brand, you're probably going to be excited to work with them. And it's just so cheap and easy for them to give you free food, but it's a big deal to you. Like I remember I was not an athlete in college and I worked a part-time job. Outside of my meal plan, I did not always have the money to go eat somewhere I wanted to eat in town. And so free food would have been a great benefit.
100%. That brings up a great point. So as these student athletes are navigating opportunities and how their brand aligns and things that they're interested in pursuing, at what point should a student athlete consider hiring an agent, if at all, to help them with their NIL deals?
I get asked this question a lot. And over on NIL Island, Aaliyah and I worked on a list of questions to ask agents because I remember when she was first looking around and trying to decide whether to sign one or not, I told her, I've had 2 broadcast agents, and then I'm now on my second literary agent. some of the things that have happened to me have changed how I would hire the next agent and some of the questions that I would ask. I actually have a whole list of questions, and maybe I can give you guys the link so people can have like all the questions. It's literally the list I would use if I was sitting down and hiring an agent. I would say, far more athletes want an agent than are going to be able to get one. There are not enough agents to service the number of athletes who would like to have an agent. And then you have agents and agencies who focus on very specific things. Like they might only focus on one sport. Maybe they only do football, or maybe they only do men's basketball, because a lot of times they're run by an agent who's already certified by a professional league. They're sort of using NIL as a way to build connections with college athletes in the hopes that those athletes will then sign with them for their pro career and let them negotiate their pro contracts. And so you have these very seasoned athlete agents who are sort of in the game, but I would say they primarily focus on athletes who are going to have professional careers. That's not 100% true across the board, but we're talking big picture. That's mostly true for ones that have experience as athlete agents. But then you have a lot of agents who are more marketing agents or social media agents. And some of them have experience where they were working with influencers long before athletes could be influencers. And they've got fantastic experience on brand deals for influencers. And now they're translating that over to sports. And that's great too. Then you also have what I call the agents in air quotes, and some people call them the schmagents. You have the people who are calling themselves agents, but who have no experience to really back that up, because there is no required registration or certification process for NIL agents. Now, recently the NCAA passed a rule and decided that they would have a voluntary registry. And that's going to be, I think, a good way to sort of vet an agent. Like if they've at least voluntarily registered with the NCAA, that's sort of a point in their favor. But there's no certification. It's not like they have to pass a test or put up a bond or these things that we see in pro sports. And so that's why I came up with the list of questions, because I do think you have to closely vet people, because there are a lot of people in this space who, frankly, don't know what they're doing. Or even one step beyond that, are being malicious and deceitful. And we've seen athletes who've had agents already steal their money, who've had them sign terrible contracts that they've gotten locked into for years and are now trying to get out of. It's following them into their professional careers in some cases. And so it's really important to vet the agent. I would say one of the most important things to do is going to be Google this agent. Like if an agent comes to you, or even if you come across them somewhere online, do some Google searches and try and figure out, like, do they have a professional looking website? Do they have an email connected to that website so that it's not at gmail.com, it's at businessofcollegesports.com, like my site is? And who have they worked with? I would try to speak with at least a couple of current clients, also former clients if you can find them. And sometimes you can find that because they get mentioned in a news article alongside that agent. Like I'm thinking off the top of my head right now, I know an athlete that I wrote some articles on who had an agent who ultimately stole her money. And he's in some of those articles that I wrote. And you would figure out she had been his client if you were researching him. And then hopefully you could reach out to her and say, what was your experience like with him? And she would say, he stole all my money. Don't work with him. So it's really important to talk to those current and former clients and ask what their experience has been like. Do they feel taken care of? Is the communication good? Has the agent brought anything extra to the table? Because even when agents are well-meaning and good people, if they're not proactively reaching out and finding you stuff, or they've taken on too many clients and they can't give you really any of their time, there's no point in signing with them and then giving up a percentage of the deals that maybe you bring to the table or that come into your DMs. So I'll share the link for all those questions with you all. But I would say like the most important thing on that whole list is finding current and former clients you can reach out to and ask about their experience, because I just hired a new literary agent and I thought I knew who I was going to sign with. There was someone who had the best sales record of all the literary agents who made me offers. And I had known of her for a long time, very reputable and well-known, very good at what she does. But I talked to a current client and a former client, and they both said almost the same thing. And they did not know each other as far as negatives working with this agent and communications issues and just problems they were having with her. And it changed my mind. I didn't sign with her. I ended up signing with somebody else. So I think it's really important to have those conversations.
Everything that you said makes perfect sense. It's almost like the idea of if you're going to hire a babysitter, you want references, right? So you want to talk to another family who's obviously worked with that babysitter and what were some great things. And so it's really just checking facts and references and making sure that before you get into a contractual agreement with anyone, that you do your research and you ask the right questions. So that's super helpful. Thank you.
Yes, doing your homework and putting out all those suggestions to make sure that you avoid the red flags. It's interesting that you say that there's not quite enough agents, because you would think a lot of people would be trying to get into this, but perhaps people that are not qualified are getting into this, or you've got scammers. It made me think of when you get a lot of DMs, do you have any suggestions on how people can vet scams?
Yeah, it's sort of similar. I would Google the company, see do they have a company website? Because a lot of times you get a DM on Instagram. I mean, I get these too, and I don't even have that big of a following. You get the DM on Instagram, but like if I go to their website, one look at their website tells me like this is probably not a company I want to work with. Sometimes they don't have a website. That's even scarier. But if they have one and it just doesn't look professionally done, then it makes me a little worried about working with that company. But I also look in there. So say they DM'd me on Instagram. This is where I see it the most. I'll go on their profile and I want to see the other influencers in their feed with their product, or like if they have a hashtag for their brand, I might look under the hashtag and see who's posting about them. And then again, I'd probably reach out to some of those influencers and say, I saw you worked with XYZ clothing company. What was your experience with them like? Try and get that same sort of feedback the same way you would with an agent. But definitely them having a website, having an email address that matches the website. They're not emailing you from AOL.com or gmail.com or anywhere like that. I look for those sorts of things and just do some Googling. There's actually several websites out there where influencers in the non-college sports space post about their experiences with brands. In fact, there's a few websites that try to almost serve as like a version of the Better Business Bureau, I guess, for lack of better explanation, where influencers will go on and they will not only tell about their experience, they'll even tell pay rates. And I can maybe send you a couple of links for that as well. But I would go on there and sort of vet the brand. And sometimes you go on there and you look at the brand, and every influencer that's put something in there is like, they never paid me. I chased them for payment for 6 months and never got it. You can do a lot of vetting just with spending some time on Google and digging around. And that's why everybody wants an agent, because they don't want to have to respond to all that stuff in their DMs. They don't want to add the time it takes. I mean, it might take you a half hour or more to look into each company if it's a brand you've never heard of before. A lot of athletes don't have time for that, which I completely understand. But, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of student athletes in the NCAA. And I would say good, reputable agent. It's different if we're talking about a whole agency with like support staff. But if we're talking about like one agent on their own, I don't know, because I'm not an agent, but if it were me, I find it hard to believe they could service more than like 15 to 20 clients. If you look at the number of student athletes who want agents and then the number of available reputable agents, they're just not able to take on huge client loads. And even when it's an agency with support staff, even the big agencies, you don't see them having that deep of a roster in any one individual sport, or like in college sports versus pro sports. So there just unfortunately aren't enough of them to go around.
That definitely makes sense. I think about doing all the research. It's better, in my opinion, to do your own research. There's all kinds of Googling. There's so much information on Reddit. Everybody's out there. They're vulnerable. They're putting things out there. I had an email come to me today and I looked up, they want to do some kind of partnership. I looked up like, no, scam. It's a scam. For those thinking that they might need an agent, they can actually learn themselves and do a better job than having the aggravation of going through finding an agent that is not necessarily having the time or the capacity to be able to help them.
Yeah. And so many of the people that end up in your DMs, they're really only offering product. They're not offering cash. And so I always tell athletes, ask yourself, if you had the money, is that a product you would buy? Like, do you genuinely want that product? Because I think athletes, especially when they get their first few DMs like that, they get really excited that a jewelry company wants to send them jewelry or a clothing company wants to send them clothing. And I had an athlete at UF who was taking my NIL class a couple of years ago. And she got very excited about this clothing brand that reached out to her in her DMs, and they were going to send her like a whole box full of clothing. And, she got to keep all of it. And they wanted, X number of posts. And I don't think there was any cash involved in that deal. I think it was just the clothes, but she was all excited to get, a box full of clothes. And she had looked through their pictures on Instagram and felt like they had, trendy, fun clothes that fit her personality. And then they got there and she got on a Zoom with me and she's showing me, and like, the seams are already coming undone. There was like a thread unraveling already from one of the things. Like it was very thin, very cheap, not well made. And it ended up taking a lot of her time. She did not post about it on her social because she didn't feel comfortable promoting this brand, but she went through this back and forth with them on what they were offering and sort of the contract, and then got the box and then didn't like the stuff. Then she had to box it back up and ship it back. It took all this time from her. And so I get offered stuff too. And I always ask myself, if I had the money, would I buy this thing? And like 95% of the time, the answer is no. That makes it an easy no, even if you're going to send it to me for free. It sounds exciting to get something for free, but it's actually a lot of work to shoot that product and to put those posts up. So make sure it's something you really want.
So this hot topic of the house settlement, I don't know how many people actually understand what it is, what it means, how it could impact student athletes. So can you just, I know it's a very big, broad thing, but could you try to like help us figure out what it is we exactly need to know about the house settlement?
I can break it down into a few things. I've got a link too that I did. I did one breakdown that was kind of for the industry that got into like the nitty gritty. I mean, the settlement that they filed in court is like 160 something pages that I read word for word over the course of like 2 days to figure out what was in there. But I have another piece I distilled down that was like, here's what athletes need to know that's in this agreement. So I'll send you a link to that. There's two kind of major pieces. There's a back pay portion, and then there's a revenue sharing portion going forward. The back pay portion is for athletes that were active from summer of 2016, essentially through current times. And it's broken down from there into broadcast revenue, video game revenue, lost NIL opportunities. Slipped my mind. I feel like there's one more thing, but they've got these different categories. Essentially, there's going to be a sports economist or maybe multiple sports economists who are going to come up with this equation for how much each individual athlete receives. And they've already put out projections based on what sport you're in and what type of school you played at that you could expect. And so this only applies to Division I. And the majority of the money is going to go to football and men's and women's basketball in Power 5 conferences. There's some additional money that's going to go to non-Power 5 in those sports. And then there's a very small pool of money that is going to go to all the other sports. So all the Olympic sports and everything outside of football, men's and women's basketball. Again, Division I only. There will be a website. Last time I looked, it wasn't up yet, but there's going to be a website that the Plaintiffs' Council will put up where athletes can enter their information to make sure that they get notified. You could end up getting anything from like $30 to tens of thousands of dollars. And even some of the football and men's basketball players are projected to be in the hundreds of thousands. And even they say that there's an athlete who's going to end up at over $1 million based on lost NIL opportunities. We don't know what the exact equation looks like, but they have put out charts that are in this link that I'll give you of what you can expect based on what sport you're in and what school you're at. So that's the back pay portion. That's going to be paid out over 10 years. Then there's the forward-looking revenue sharing portion. And this is where schools in Division I again, and primarily Power 5, are going to share revenue with their athletes. And the number for the first year is believed to be between $21 and $22 million. That will be the ceiling a school can go up to. They can do anything from zero to that 21 to 22 million. And each individual school gets to decide who they're sharing revenue with. Are they only going to share with, say, football and men's and women's basketball, or are they going to share with every sport? And so it's going to look really different from one school to the next. And schools don't know yet. I was just having a conversation with an athletic director yesterday, and they were saying recruits right now, because revenue sharing, if the settlement is approved by the judge, revenue sharing would begin fall of 2025. Well, you have students who right now are having to make those decisions about where to commit for fall of 2025. And they want to know, what does my full benefits package look like, including revenue sharing? And the answer is schools don't know, because no school has finalized what that formula is going to look like, which sports and which athletes they're going to share with. There's a lot of Title IX questions around that. It's just a lot that schools don't have answers to yet. Plus, the settlement hasn't even been approved by the judge. It could still be changed from here. And so we don't really know ultimately what revenue sharing will end up looking like, but it will be one of those things that as a parent, if you're the parent of a high school student athlete or a college athlete who's still going to have eligibility left, you may be negotiating this. Some schools have said, we're not going to negotiate it. There's going to be a form agreement. You either sign it or you don't. I don't believe that's ultimately how it's going to work out. I think there's going to be negotiations, and this is going to be part of what you negotiate as you are being recruited or as you transfer. But some schools are planning to have additional requirements. Like in order to get the revenue share, you have to do X number of posts for the athletic department, or you have to do X number of personal appearances, or you have to participate in all team activities. That's a football one that's aimed at keeping people from opting out of bowl games. So from school to school, the amount you're offered might look different. And also the terms that you have to agree to in order to receive that amount might look different. So interesting space. And I said this in an interview the other day. Somebody asked me what did I think was the most difficult part about this, or where did the issues arise? And I said, I'm really worried about parents being knowledgeable enough to understand and negotiate these things as their kid is trying to decide where to go to school. And not that this would be the sole determining factor, but I think we all know it is going to be a factor, especially for more elite athletes.
Sounds super complicated.
It is.
Each school being different, you're already doing so much research in where you want to go to school in the first place and what they're offering you. It can be so different.
I was talking to somebody yesterday, an accountant that works with schools, and she was saying some of the schools she's working with, they're going to do away with Alston Awards. And like some parents haven't even really figured out what Alston Awards are yet because they've only been around for a few years. And now Alston Awards, some schools may just do away with it because instead they're presenting this big picture benefits package. Some schools have said that if they're going to share more revenue, they may reduce what they're doing in scholarships. And so a related issue that I didn't mention, but I would say this is one of the top things I'm getting asked by parents right now. A lot of folks who followed that settlement heard that the roster caps are changing for sports, and for almost every sport, the roster cap is going up. And now athletic departments can offer full scholarships up to the roster cap. So sports like baseball and softball in particular, we're super excited about this because this has long been a problem, in particular for baseball. And now they can offer full scholarships. I run a Facebook group for parents, and I had a parent say, my daughter's a Division I soccer player. This means she's going to get a full scholarship, right? I was like, no, that doesn't mean. It means they can offer her a full scholarship. They do not have to. So each individual athletic department will get to decide how many scholarships they want to provide up to that roster cap. You can still get partials. You can still not get one at all. The rule is just that now you can, if you had the money and the resources as an athletic department, you can offer a full scholarship to everyone on the roster. But it doesn't mean that you have to. And we're going to see some adjustments because football's number of scholarships is going up. You're going to have to see some adjustments, obviously, on the female side for Title IX reasons. So we're definitely going to see some movement in different sports, but it is going to look wildly different from one school to the next. And I do think it means some schools will ultimately cut some sports because now they're going to be doing revenue sharing. They're potentially going to decide to offer more scholarships in some sports where they currently don't offer. So baseball was 11.7, and now baseball, I think, is going up to 34, somewhere in the 30s. If they decide they want to fully fund baseball because that's an important sport for their school, they might drop another sport because they can't afford to do that. So the settlement actually talks about that, and it does allow for schools to make decisions about what sports they're going to continue to sponsor and at what scholarship level they're going to be at. It's a lot of new things for parents to know going into recruiting, and I don't see a lot of resources being provided to parents to learn this stuff.
Well, we are appreciative of you explaining it. So hopefully they'll listen to this podcast and get some of this information. I'm learning a lot, and it is so complicated because nothing is cut and dry, and how you're saying each school can do this differently. Can you go back to the back pay portion of the settlement a little bit? Because you mentioned summer of 2016. Is anything in that equation about how much involvement in NIL that you took part in once it was allowed? Or is this going to be overall to everyone that was on that Division I team?
Yeah, so it depends on what sport you're in. It's kind of broken down a little bit differently for each sport, and the lost NIL opportunities are a smaller part of the back pay than things like the TV broadcast revenue and the video game revenue. The lost NIL opportunities, based on my reading of the House settlement, and I've talked to 2 agents about this, the agents agreed with me. They do think that this is how it's worded. In order to get this back pay for lost NIL opportunities, are you going to be willing to turn over the deals the athlete did to sort of prove their value? The agents both said probably yes, that in order to get that they probably would. I would imagine a lot of that will be anonymized or aggregated in some way. I don't think they're going to want to like turn over the contract as is. I think some things are probably going to have to be redacted, or that's going to have to be handled in a really delicate way. But for that portion of the settlement, it is going to require that you actually file documentation, it sounds like.
I can hear the lawyer coming out in you just with
Yeah.
the settlement and all of these terms and things that are still to be
Oh.
negotiated. And I just love hearing about it. I agree with you 100% on the confusion that this could cause for parents trying to help their athlete navigate through all of this. And when you mention like what the benefits package may look like for every athlete, not only just high school recruited athletes, but kids that may be looking to transfer. I do have a soccer player who's a junior who now is being contacted by college coaches, but it's this hurry up and wait type of thing that's going on. It's like, we have to still recruit you, but also we're just going to keep an eye on you because we don't really know what we can offer and what it's going to look like. And we still want to just keep watching you. And on that hand, it's sad to me because you've got these high school athletes that are super anticipatory and excited, but they don't yet feel like they can get excited because they just don't know. I guess my question is, since we know this is going to be a challenge, what changes do you anticipate developing in the NIL landscape? How all this looks big picture for the student athlete between NIL, how settlement deals, what the recruit landscape could look like? What do you anticipate here?
From a timing perspective, earliest we would see the House settlement approved would be in the first quarter of 2025. They've just filed it with the judge. The judge will have to listen to opposition, and we already know there is some opposition. Houston Christian has already filed to intervene in the case because they feel like non-Power Fives are going to end up having to pay some of this back pay to Power Five athletes. It gets very complicated. And we also know there are some athletes who don't feel like the settlement ultimately was fair, and they'll have the opportunity to opt out. They can decide not to be part of this settlement and bring their own cases. And there are other cases already pending right now. So the earliest we would see it agreed to and signed by the judge would be first quarter of 2025. And so what's written in the agreement is the first back payments would be made into the escrow account by the NCAA and the schools May 15th of 2025. So I don't think you would see distribution on back pay till probably sometime in the summer. So that would be the earliest that would happen for back pay. And then that would make the earliest for revenue sharing being that 2025-2026 school year. And all the schools I know right now are preparing as if it is going to get signed and revenue sharing is going to happen for 2025-26. Many of them are already right now trying to figure out what their formula looks like, which sports and which athletes are they going to offer it to, how is it going to affect the rest of the aid package that they offer, and then also how are they going to fund their sports in terms of how are they going to change scholarship levels, different things happening. And I feel bad for coaches because right now coaches don't have the answers, and they're going to be like the last to know as this gets decided by the administrators. But you have to figure out not only what the revenue sharing looks like, but coaches don't even know right now how many scholarships they will have to offer in 2025, unless their AD has already given them assurance, like you'll have at least what you have right now. Okay, then they can recruit knowing I'm not going to go down, I'm going to have what I have right now. Or maybe they're already getting promises, although I haven't really heard of this, but maybe some people are already getting promises that theirs are going to go up. But most athletic departments I know are not ready to set those right now. They're still looking at their budget and figuring out, okay, how much can we afford to revenue share? And where does that money come from? Because right now we're using that money. What are we cutting back on? Are we canceling a facilities project? Are we laying off staff? Are we cutting a sport? There's a lot of different things on the table. I wouldn't expect those things to all shake out till sometime next summer. I think we're a year out from a lot of people. So I think in particular, students who are getting recruited or transferring for 2025, 2026, I'm sorry, I feel the worst for you because I think it's going to be a lot of last minute stuff and a lot of changes. The good news is with the transfer rule the way it is now, if you're not happy somewhere, you can go somewhere else, and you can even do it. You can sign in one place and you can change before you even set foot on campus. People are doing that all the time now. And so you've got that freedom of mobility that you didn't have before, but you're going to have to make some decisions based on maybe like gut feelings and like, I hope we can do this versus promises. I don't think coaches are going to be armed with the information to tell you everything you're going to be able to get until kind of the last minute.
Very transitional time. So thank you for explaining that to all of us. Finishing up here, what is the best advice that you have for sports moms that want to support their athletes in navigating the NIL opportunities and challenges?
I think it's probably just trying to seek out resources on this. Teamworks has a new partnership with the NCAA. In fact, I just filmed a video for them the other day that'll be in there on questions to ask agents, and they're going to have tons of other resources in there from other folks with accounting backgrounds. I think there's going to be a variety of information available in there on legal, finances, personal branding, you name it, and sort of learning those things alongside your athlete. And then two, on all the house settlement stuff, sort of following the news, not to plug my own site, but I'm one of the only people I know of. I'd love for people to point me to other resources. I try whenever there's something like this to do a post that's here's what athletes and their parents need to know. Like I'll do one for administrators that's like a deep dive that gets into the nitty gritty. But both when they initially announced the house settlement and then now with the filed settlement, I did a dedicated post that's here's what athletes and parents need to know. And I run a Facebook group that is just for parents of high school and college athletes. And actually, we have some people in there with 8-year-olds and 10-year-olds. So it doesn't have to be high school. We've got all kinds of levels of youth athletics in there. We have an incredible 10-year-old volleyball player in there doing NIL deals like crazy. It's incredible what some of these athletes are doing at a young age, trying to find those resources, because I do think that a lot of parents are going to be put in a tough position of having to negotiate these things. And if you don't understand what you could be asking for, you might agree to a lot less than your athlete deserves.
Well, we appreciate all of these links and resources and your website that you're going to be sharing with us, because that's just giving all of the parents and the athletes so many resources and guidance in this confusing world of NIL.
Probably just like giving people more questions than answers here, but at least I feel like you have to hear things multiple times before you really get it. So at least we've done a big picture,
Yes.
10,000 foot here. And then I'm always happy to answer questions. And I started the Facebook group that I have because I couldn't respond to all the emails. There were just too many. And at least in the Facebook group, somebody can ask the question and I can answer. And there's other experts in the group who can answer. And then everyone can see it, versus if I have to reply to 15 different emails asking me the same question. So I'm going to start going live in that group more so that people can ask me questions live. It doesn't cost anything. It's free. I just enjoy doing it. So I will send you guys all sorts of links you can put in your show notes because I want to help point parents to the right resources.
Thank you. Thank you. We so appreciate you.
I know.
Thanks for
I've loved
having me.
hearing everything from you, Kristi. You're just literally a wealth of knowledge, and we're so honored that you joined us today on Sports Mom Report. So what is the best way for people to keep up with you?
businessofcollegesports.com is my main site where I'm writing, almost every single day or putting resources up there. And then I own NIL Island with Tara's daughter, Leah, and we have a lot of athlete specific resources that are there. My contact page, when you fill that out, that email comes straight into my inbox. You'll get my out of office because it's always up because it has links to resources to some of my most commonly asked questions. It has a link to that Facebook group, for example, but I'll load you guys up with some links here and then would love to hear from people and happy to answer additional questions or point you towards the right resources.
We're so glad you've joined us today. Thank you for listening. Upcoming episodes and show info can all be found at sportsmomreport.com. If you've enjoyed the show, please share it with a friend. We'd love to hear from you, so please reach out to us with any comments or if you or someone you know would like to share their story and connect with us.